Euphrasie Barbier, Chapter 8, 1872. Outward Bound. A group of Marist missionaries was due to leave France in October, travelling with Bishop Bataillon of Oceania, and a large group of French missionaries going to various places in Africa and the East. Euphrasie took some time to prepare herself spiritually for the next step. She consulted her spiritual director, Father Bruno, and in her little notebook wrote down her personal resolutions for the immediate future. They were not unlike what she normally practiced, for she had long been an astute observer of her own character. To give as much time as possible to mental prayer, not to increase penances, enough there, to abandon myself to God and moderate my natural activity, impetuosity, impatience, to stop all interior self-inspection, to lose myself in God. When the next group of new missionaries caught their boat at Marseille, Euphrasie was with them. Sisters Hilary and Mary of the Angels were heading for the Wallis Islands. A novice, Sister Mary of Nazareth, was travelling to New Zealand with Euphrasie. The four travelled south by train to the great seaport and boarded their ship Amazon, one of the new steam-sailing vessels. They settled themselves into their small cabin, tucking their luggage neatly into every small space available. As the ship moved out of the harbour, Euphrasie realized that she would never be a good sailor. She had never enjoyed the trip from Calais to Dover, though she had made the crossing many times. This voyage was 1,000 times worse. The more experienced among the travellers urged her to lie down, but that brought little relief. The boat was heaving and rocking, and her stomach followed it. She had a splitting headache. Hardier passengers offered advice. Make yourself eat something. It will settle your stomach. Don't eat anything. Let your stomach rest. Don't eat, do drink. Lie down. Don't lie down. Keep on your feet. Try a bit of this. Try a bit of that. The infallible cures did nothing for her nausea or her headache. After wretched days and nights, the boat stopped at Port Said for coaling. Most of the passengers went ashore to stretch their legs, but Euphrasie was too weak even to climb up to the deck. In port the boat shuddered and clanked from time to time, but at least it was still. Sitting on the edge of her bunk, Euphrasie got out her pen and paper and started a quick letter to the mother house. My dearest children, here we are at our first stop, and though I can't write much, I must tell you how close you are to me. She told them a little about the 100 other passengers on the ship. She urged them to pray, especially for brave old missionaries. She reminded them to remain faithful in trying always to come closer to God. Characteristically, she said not a word about her own constant seasickness. All too soon the engines began to throb again. As the ship entered the Red Sea, the extreme heat of the tropics was added to the other discomforts. The captain offered the sisters a second cabin. Even with only 2 people in her cabin, Euphrasie felt she was suffocating. The ship rolled, and the air in the little room was still and close, as warm as an oven, and steadily getting warmer. Euphrasie vomited for hours on an empty stomach. She had one asthma attack after another. It was a complaint which had troubled her from time to time from her childhood, but never before had she had such a bad bout. As the night closed around them, she murmured, "If the portholes are not opened, I think I shall die." Sister Mary Hilary, horribly seasick herself, stumbled to her feet. She knew that the portholes could not be opened. She had already found that they were firmly screwed down. She staggered out into the narrow alley. "Call a doctor! Please call a doctor!" she cried to a passenger passing by. A few minutes later, the ship's surgeon came. He looked kindly enough at Euphrasie, who was gasping. "Air! Please, air!" Without a word, he turned and left the cabin. Clinging to the doorpost, Sister Hilary tried to call him back, but he had already disappeared down the dark alley. In despair, she returned to Euphrasie's side. She could hardly bear to watch. It seemed that death was already in her mother's face. A scuffle at the door made her turn her head. A large sailor with mallet and screwdriver was trying to come in. "Captain's orders, ma'am," he said. "Scuttle to be opened for a quarter of an hour, but no longer." In a few moments the sea breeze was pouring in, a warm breeze, but fresh and flowing. Sister Hilary wiped Euphrasie's face and her own, and sank back onto her bunk. Almost immediately, it seemed, the sailor was back. "Must close up now," he said. "Captain's orders." "Oh, please, please, just a little longer," begged Sister Hilary. "See, not a splash of water has come in. It's perfectly safe." "Well, ma'am, just a minute or two then," said the sailor. He did not return until 9 o'clock, but then there was no way they could delay him. There was still the long hot night to live through. Suddenly Sister Hilary had an idea. Clinging to the handrail, she climbed up the stairs to the deck, now deserted. In the dim light of the calm tropical night, she saw what she was looking for, the long, low, pale shape of a cane deck chair. It was light enough for her to lift with ease in spite of her weakness. Bumping it awkwardly down the narrow companionway steps, she carried it below and laid it on the small floor space of the cabin. She spread several cushions and a blanket over the canework. "Reverend Mother," she called gently, and Euphrasie opened her eyes. "Come, Reverend Mother, lie down here," she invited. Holding the chair firm with one hand, she steadied Euphrasie with the other. As Euphrasie sank onto the little couch, Sister Hilary stripped a rug from a bunk and tucked it firmly around her. In a few minutes she found a friendly steward, and together they carried the deck chair and its burden up the narrow stairs to the dining saloon, and placed it beside a large open porthole overlooking the deck. It was hardly an enjoyable night, but for both of them it was the best they had had since the trip started. At Aden, the next stop, all the missionaries for Africa and the East left the Amazon for their various destinations. When the other passengers went ashore for the night, the other two sisters joined Euphrasie and Sister Hilary, and the four made themselves comfortable on the open deck. They all slept well until the morning light, and men's voices disturbed them. The sailors were scurrying around, and shouted orders came up from the docks below. "Refuelling, ma'am," one of the sailors informed them. "We'll cast off in a couple of hours." The two younger sisters quickly gathered up their rugs and retired below, but Sister Hilary insisted that Euphrasie stay where she was. She dragged the deck chair with Euphrasie on it to a quiet place underneath the dining saloon porthole. There they were out of the sailors' way, sheltered from the strong sunshine, and able to enjoy the fresh air. The deck now became Euphrasie's home, even when the seas were rough and the winds turned cold and spray swept over the deck. Sister Hilary fetched dry blankets when they were needed, but day and night they camped on the deck. One day, when the weather was particularly wild, a gust of wind actually lifted Euphrasie's chair and carried her along the wet deck. Sister Hilary trailed behind, clinging to her mother, praying at the top of her voice and screaming for help. A couple of sailors ran to the rescue, dragging the chair back to a sheltered position, and lashing it down firmly to a rail and to a metal ring sunk into the deck planking. "We should tie you down too, sisters," they teased. In spite of their jokes, the danger had been serious. Even experienced sailors could be swept overboard in strong gusts, and in a heavy sea there was no hope of rescue. One of their new friends soon came back with more ropes. Bashfully he said, "We'd better tie you down too, Mother. Next time you mightn't be so lucky." To their surprise, he lightly looped a rope several times around Euphrasie, and then fastened the ends underneath her deck chair. "Can you slip out if you want to?" he asked, lifting Euphrasie's rope a little. "All right, stay there, but now you have something to grip in a high wind." The seas did not quieten until they approached the coast of Australia. When the ship anchored in Albany to load and unload cargo, it was as steady as a rock. Euphrasie began to walk up and down the deck to regain her balance. At the next stop, Melbourne, they were to change ships. She and Sister Mary of Nazareth were to take a ship for New Zealand, and the others one for the islands. The sisters for Wallace began to sort out their luggage, stacking it neatly in a pile in their cabin, ready for transfer to their new ship. Euphrasie began to rearrange hers too. "Let's put our bags together here, sister," she said to the novice, and then she stared in surprise. Sister Mary of Nazareth had entered the cabin wearing a pretty frock Euphrasie had never seen before. She held out her habit, neatly folded up in a small bundle. "No, Reverend Mother," she said, "I am not going with you. I am staying with friends here in Melbourne." Euphrasie was shocked and disappointed, and not a little alarmed, but nothing would change the girl's mind. "They are my friends. No, I hadn't met them before this voyage. Of course I can trust them. They are my friends, and they are going to help me," she kept saying. She turned a deaf ear to all Euphrasie's arguments for prudence. "Well, at least take this," said Euphrasie. She fumbled inside her handbag, and pulled out all the money she had, 250 francs, the fare for the next part of her journey. The novice hesitated for a moment. Euphrasie's heart leapt. "Let her, oh please let her," she prayed silently. But the girl held out her hand and took the money. "Thank you," she said awkwardly, with a weak smile. "Goodbye." She turned away, and Euphrasie saw her only once more, far away in the stream of passengers leaving the ship. She was following her new friends, the young people she had known for only a few weeks. The sisters for Wallace transferred to their new ship. Before the group broke up for the final parting, Euphrasie drew Bishop Bataillon aside. With great embarrassment, she asked him to lend her enough money for her passage on the next boat. The bishop was graciousness itself, and all concern when she told him the circumstances. He confessed that he was not surprised by the news. "I have spoken to the young lady myself more than once," he admitted. "I tried to advise her to behave more prudently. I feared that something like this would happen. Reverend Mother, there is nothing more you can do. She is a grown woman. She must live with her own choices." Euphrasie heard his reassurances, but she remained sick at heart, grieving that someone once eager to give herself entirely to God could suddenly throw away her vocation. She blamed herself that she had not foreseen the tragedy in time to prevent it. Several times she had quite firmly reproved Sister Mary of Nazareth for her frivolity, but the faults she had noticed had seemed at the time to be little more than youthful thoughtlessness in unusual and exciting surroundings. Euphrasie set off alone on the last stretch of her journey, the shortest but by no means the easiest. A few days' rest in Melbourne had helped her to find her feet again, but from the beginning the trip to New Zealand was rough. When the storm eased on the third day, the captain was able to get his bearings for the first time by sighting the Snares, 3 rocks many miles south of New Zealand. The ship had been blown well off course, and the captain anchored while he planned his new route. The stop was of little comfort. The waves were still mountainous. The ship had taken some damage, and some shifting of the cargo had given it a noticeable list. The passengers were cold, wet, miserable, and very frightened. On Christmas Day they sighted New Zealand through the rain and waves, and their spirits began to lift. "Oh, you've got a long way to go yet, ma'am," chuckled the captain to Euphrasie. "Half this long island, in fact. But we'll have a couple days' rest at Dunedin first." Euphrasie was triumphant. In spite of all the difficulties, she was really in New Zealand at last. She used the brief stop well. She went ashore to meet Bishop Moran of Dunedin, who had been caring for a large part of New Zealand since the recent death of Bishop Viard. He knew all her sisters well, he told her, and he mentioned them by name. Euphrasie was charmed by his kindness. Before returning to the ship, she had one particularly happy task to do. She sent a telegram to the sisters in Christchurch. At the very time that Euphrasie was writing out her telegram in Dunedin, the sisters in Christchurch were closing their school year with a party for the children. It was a wonderful party, and by the time Sister Mary of the Redemption closed the door behind the last little departing figure, the sisters were exhausted. "We'd better clean up," said one, and she sat down heavily. "Yes, yes," said the others, but none stirred from their bench. "It will soon be New Year. Do you think Reverend Mother General really will come to New Zealand next year?" asked another. "No, she couldn't," Sister Mary Madeline replied. "She'd never stand the voyage, for one thing. Remember what it was like for us? She thinks she can, but she doesn't know how hard it is. It's too far, and would take too long, and she's too busy at the mother house. We'll never see her here. I hope for her sake that she never tries to come." "Well, come on, we'd better start," said someone. "It was a lovely party, but look at all this mess to clean up, and all that heavy furniture to move again." They looked with distaste at the dirty tables and littered floor, the wreckage left from feasting and games. The doorbell rang. Sister Raphael stood up, but the others barely stirred. She went out, and they all settled down again. Then they heard her feet running. Running? "Sisters!" she burst in, her face beaming. It wasn't a disaster then. "Sisters, she's here! I mean, she's in Dunedin. Our mother, Reverend Mother General, she's here!" She flapped the yellow telegraph paper in her hand. "Meet me in Littleton, 29, inst," they read. They leapt to their feet and hugged each other. "The 29th? 2 days to get ready," they cried. Weariness forgotten, they sprang into action. By the morning of the 29th, the school and house were spick and span and beautifully decorated for the occasion. A group of pupils had been hastily called in from their vacation to rehearse their best performances in singing and recitation, for there was to be a short concert to welcome the distinguished guest. 2 sisters set off for the train to take them through the tunnel to Littleton Harbour. As they walked quickly along the short distance to the railway station, they met Father Chervier, the parish priest, trotting in his wagonette back to his presbytery. He greeted them cheerily. "And where are you off to in such a hurry this fine morning?" "We're going to meet our Mother General. Her ship comes in today," they replied. Wait for me, I'm coming too," he shouted. Horse and carriage flew past and into the churchyard, where he threw the reins over a hitching post and leapt out of the vehicle. Only 40 minutes later, the 3 were at the jetty in Littleton. The Albion was anchored far out in the harbour, as the tide was at low water. Tiny figures of waiting passengers lined the ship's rail. "How long?" began Sister Mary Madeline, but Father Chervier was already bargaining for a small boat. Out on the water, long before they reached the ship's side, the sisters recognized the small black figure standing at the rail, waving vigorously to them. The meeting was rapturous. "That telegram, Mother," they laughed. "You should have seen us jump. It was like an electric shock." And Euphrasie laughed with them. Father Chervier ushered them all ashore. Before the next train to town, they had time to visit the parish priest of Littleton and admire the developments there. By the time they had returned to Christchurch and finished the ceremonies of welcome, Euphrasie was almost prostrate with exhaustion. She would have preferred the sisters not to see it. She tried to smile, to stand upright firmly, but she could hardly grasp what they were saying to her. She stood at the door of her little room, her hand resting on the doorpost. "Sisters, I must make a retreat for a few days. Please excuse me," she said, and she closed the door behind her. The sisters were bitterly disappointed. It was so long since they had seen her. There was so much to tell and to ask. The sister who tapped at the door and passed in her meals was besieged by the others. "How does she look? She's not ill, is she? Does she still look tired?" they asked. "Well, if she wants a retreat, we must not disturb her, but perhaps—" When New Year's Eve came, 2 days later, they gathered flowers from their garden, now at its early summer best. Carefully, each one made a little bouquet. At last came time for the evening meal. Sister tapped on the door as usual, but this time there was no tray in her hand. The others gathered behind her in a semicircle, each with her bouquet ready. They heard a footstep and the door opened. Euphrasie put out her hand for the tray, and then she noticed them. "Happy New Year, Mother!" they chorused. "The retreat is over!" Euphrasie began to laugh, and she opened the door wide, holding up her arms to them as she came out. They greeted each other all over again, and the delighted community led their Reverend Mother General to the celebrations they had prepared for her coming. From the next morning, Euphrasie was very busy. There was so much she needed to see and to do. First of all, she wrote to the mother house. They would be wondering and worrying about the missionaries' safety during that last voyage. They would be longing, too, to hear fresh news of their sisters in New Zealand. The Christchurch community wanted to show everything, to tell everything, to hear everything. She talked to them about the constitutions, and they thirsted to hear her instructions and her suggestions. They were full of enthusiasm, but they were not always sure that they were doing things the right way. "We have some postulants here who would like to join us, Reverend Mother," they said. "We couldn't take them into our community to live, as the Napier sisters are doing. We haven't room for them. But we have really tried to teach them what religious life is about, and they are trying to pray well." "You must bring them here to meet me," said Euphrasie. "We have permission from Rome to open a novitiate here, and we must talk about these girls. Perhaps some are already mature enough to receive the holy habit." The 3 girls who presented themselves delighted Euphrasie with their eagerness and sound knowledge. She directed a 10 days retreat especially for them, and at the end of it, Bishop Moran gave them the holy habit and formally opened the Christchurch novitiate, the second novitiate of the congregation. The new novices were delighted. They had new names and real habits. They looked like real sisters, and they longed to grow more and more into their new life. Euphrasie spoke to them often about their wonderful vocation as future missionaries, and she told them about their new sisters in the novitiate in Lyon. "Write to them," she said. "Write to each other and pray for each other. Encourage each other to excel in loving and serving our Lord. He deserves only the best we can give. He wants our hearts before anything else." Urgent messages began to come from Nelson. The sisters there, were particularly anxious for Euphrasie to visit them as soon as possible, because Sister Mary Michael of their community was dying. The sisters had a flourishing mission in Nelson, Euphrasie found, but she feared that they were working themselves to death. They had a parish school, an orphanage, and a boarding school, all held in such high regard by Catholics and Protestants alike, that now the local people were clamouring for an upper-class school. The sisters were working day and night, teaching, instructing converts, and visiting the sick, as well as nursing their own dying sister. Euphrasie was amused to hear them talking earnestly about old towns and new settlements. To her eye, the whole colony seemed so new, so raw, so unfinished. Most buildings, public and private, were built of timber, and many streets were mere dirt tracks. They are so proud of their new country. Already their hearts are with the people here. They are true missionaries, she thought. But where are the natives? I have seen none of the natives of this country, she said one day. She was surprised to see no Maori children in the school. You'll see, Mother, said one of the sisters. They'll come from their own village for the sacraments when the bishop comes for confirmation. Sure enough, when Bishop Moran arrived a few days later, there was an invasion of the parish grounds by a great crowd of handsome brown-skinned men, women, and children. They seem so poor, remarked Euphrasie, as the crowd seated themselves on the ground in the open air, many of them wrapped in dark or coloured blankets. Then she noticed that many of the blankets sheltered tiny infants tucked into the warmth of their parents' bodies. They have all come for the sacraments, Mother, a sister said. The newborn babies will be baptized by the bishop later today. Euphrasie was amazed. Such faith, such reverence, such hardiness, she exclaimed. Yet these people are commonly called savages. I cannot help but compare their sacrifices and devotion with the indifference and spiritual laziness of so many civilized Catholics of Christian Europe. Busy as they were, the sisters were delighted to have their mother with them. There was so much they wanted to hear from her, and time was so precious. Day and night someone had to sit with Sister Michael, and Euphrasie took a turn with the others. By the second week of Euphrasie's visit, Sister Michael was still not dead. One day her doctor went away, shaking his head in disbelief. His patient, warmly wrapped up in a blanket, was sitting up with the other sisters, asking news of the mother house, and talking of old times and old friends. They all wanted to hear the stories of the troubles in France, and the sisters' adventures and difficulties. They loved to hear Euphrasie talk about the congregation's development, and the official approval given by the church's officers in Rome. They spent hours with her, studying and discussing the constitutions of their congregation, constitutions which had not been fully drawn up when most of them had left the mother house. Weeks went by quickly and happily. Sister Michael was no longer in danger of death, and the sisters in Nelson began to realize that their time with their mother was running out. The sisters in Napier were growing tired of waiting their turn for a visit from their Mother General. At last came the day the Nelson missionaries dreaded. Euphrasie set out by boat for the first mission in New Zealand. Cook Strait, the narrow strip of water between the North and South Islands is often stormy. This time the sea was so wild that the ship had to take shelter in Wellington Harbour and put its passengers ashore. For almost a week Euphrasie stayed with the Sisters of Mercy, who were kindness itself to her. When at last the ship arrived at Napier, it was at 2 a.m. on a cold, wet winter morning. On the dock, among the ropes and junk and flickering lanterns, 2 sisters were waiting for their visitor. Their superior had earlier been down to Christchurch to hear some of Euphrasie's instructions to the sisters. Now the Napier community wanted to show her how well they were trying to live up to the ideals of the constitutions. It was a joy to them just to be with their mother again, to see her affectionate smile, and to hear her kind, wise, encouraging words. Days and weeks flew by, and their happy time had to come to its end. Now the sisters in the Pacific Islands were begging her to come as soon as possible. In Samoa, young Sister Vincent was dying, and she longed to see her mother once more. In Futuna, old Sister Mary of Carmel, one of the pioneers, was sinking fast, and she wanted to meet the loving Mother Mary, whom she knew only from her long correspondence. There was no regular shipping service from New Zealand to the islands, so Euphrasie knew that she must take the first opportunity that came. When news came that a passage was available, she immediately hurried to Auckland with Mother Mary of Seven Sorrows and Sister Mary Frances of Assisi, and they set out for Tonga. The trip took 3 weeks. Remembering her shortcomings as a sailor, Euphrasie stayed on deck right from the beginning of the trip, but it was a most unpleasant voyage nonetheless, and she was sick for the whole time.